Thank you, everybody, for joining Cafecito Chats. Today's session, we're going to be talking about what does the shutdown really mean, and does it affect you or does it affect your job? So, as you know, we recently just kind of went into the shutdown mode of government shutdown because the Congress couldn't come to an agreement of sorts, right, with the budget and the whole reforms that are going through that particular set in the government. But at this point, what does that really mean? There's been a lot of commotion, a lot of questions, and everybody is really asking. So today's topic is how does the shutdown really affect our jobs, right? And what does the shutdown mean to you, to everybody, and to people that you know? What does it affect with your immediate job and your school? If you are a student, if you're a professional, how does that affect you at your immediate job? And why should you be informed about what's going on with the government and the government shutdown at this point, right? Why is this important? So those are the questions for the topic at hand. It's a very hot topic, and at this point, just this morning, I started seeing a flurry as a professional and as a DoD employee or a contractor employee. I work for a company, and for that matter, they've been sending communication because there's concern amongst the employee population here, right? And they've told us that for us, because it's a large company, we're not necessarily immediately affected. That's the wording, immediately impacted. It depends on how long this is going to extend for. However, some of our customers, because they are government agencies, government entities, like the USAF, Air Force, and or the Navy, have been immediately impacted, and they've communicated to us that some of the work that they're doing has to continue. However, they did mention that some of their staff has been quote unquote furloughed. What does furlough mean? Furlough, from what I understand, means that you are sent home without pay, right? Some of those individuals, essential individuals, have been indicated to continue working, navigating whatever projects, whatever scope has been going on at a limited capacity, but this is, from my understanding, without pay. That doesn't mean that you're not going to eventually get paid. It just means that the pay gets deferred to a further future date. That's my understanding. But with that in mind, I know that Mr. Mike Cruz has probably gone through a lot more government shutdowns. And how does this really affect our immediate job, our companies and our society? So I'm gonna ping Mr. Mike Cruz to give us a rundown of what he has experienced and what his thoughts are on this particular situation that we're going through today.
Yeah, I've been through a couple of rifts and through a couple of shutdowns during the Nixon years, et cetera, et cetera. But it basically depends on where you are. Okay, if you're a government employee, you can get furloughed or you can get non-pay status. You're still working if you're, and then so those are like the third one is if you're a critical employee to the government, you don't you stay on the job if you're critical. Now that's people that are working in areas that would be detrimental to the safety of the defense of the United States. And so in the laboratory, we were critical because you still needed calibrations to keep everything working fine, et cetera, et cetera. So a couple of government shutdowns affected me where I had no promotion for like 2 years. They wouldn't promote anybody, so set back. Uh, since I was critical, I never got furloughed or status work without pay. So that could be affected government employees in like several different ways. And I guess Mindy is kind of the contractor. So if you're a contractor, generally the bill doesn't stop. I think I'm correct. I maybe someone can correct me, but contracts to the private industry are not affected. I think the contracts are still in place. Okay, but that just says you get to do your work. But if you're on the other end, if you got a federal agency that you're dealing with, they may have shut down or limited their
Mm-hmm.
productivity, so that may affect you and your product line going to them. So it depends on where you are. If you're a contractor, generally, I don't think you're affected that much unless the program you're running on, if they shut it down. If they say they say, hey, okay, this program is on hold, you no longer can do it. Now, I think that's going to be very rare because most government programs for DoD are critical. So I think there's a caveat there. Now, if you're non-DoD, there may be some instances where there's some real shutdowns where the government agencies like health and welfare or EPA or whatever, and there may be some shutdowns. So it all depends on how the administration wants to administer the shutdown, basically. And all we're talking about is money. That's the bottom line is that they need to pass the budget to spend money. So money's already been allocated uh, uh, up to a point. If the money's still allocated, you're okay, and you may not be affected. But if the allocation is in this budget and it doesn't come through, then you're going to be affected, directly, because there's no funds are going to go into that allocation. So if your program is allocated and it's critical, you're probably not going to be affected. It's the lesser non-critical jobs in the government, which are basically, it all depends how the administration wants to look at it. Generally, DoD jobs are critical, but some of the military people can go non-essential employees, even military, like staff jobs, like you had mentioned. They may put on furlough because they're non-critical. If you're not critical, they can put you on furlough or say, okay, you're not. Basically, you don't get paid. So, I mean, that's the bottom line. You're not going to get paid now. Will you get it later? Generally so, because unless you get fired, or unless a RIF comes in, reduction in force, which means they're actually letting people go. If it hits that point, then that's serious. Then you lose your job if the rifts occur. But I don't. Maybe non-critical assets. They may they could get furloughed. Furloughed is okay because you get your job back. You're not fired. But if they put a RIF out, then that's serious. You'll lose your job. So I think the government we've been through them more than once. I think there's kind of a slowdown in federal and government activity, but things generally don't stop. It's a thorn in the side, basically. You may get affected for a short time, but if you're living on a month to month, a week to week revenue stream, and you get furloughed, that could hurt. That could hurt. And so it all depends on where you are in industry, both private and government. Military people, I think there are times that military people weren't going to get paid. The non-essential again, non-essential people. They can put them on furlough and tell them to go home and come back when it's over with. So the longer it goes, the more tension, the more stress. You're going to see Congress, both sides fighting tooth and nail for what they want. And the bottom line is what the Dems want and what the Republicans want. They're both holding things that they want to do. And they'll say, well, we're not going to go unless you give them something, because it's tit for tat in the government. It's quit. You got to negotiate and give some and take some. And so when they're butting heads, they'll do that for a while until you and I scream loud enough about this whole thing and tell them to get off their rear ends and get this thing resolved. So every shutdown has been resolved. It's just a money issue, and somebody's going to have to lose a little bit on both sides, and somebody will gain on both sides. But I guess the best advice right now is find out if you're in a company, understand what the consequences are for this shutdown. If you're working on a government contract, I don't think the contracts will be affected because it's already been allocated. The money's already been spent. This is new money for new projects and new things.
Thank
So
you so much.
stay
Yeah,
with
yeah.
it.
Stay with it, right? So that being said, contract work and whatnot. Mindy, you work in a lab. Mindy, I don't know if you can turn on your mic, but if you can, how with this new situation that's just developing today, how is this affecting you? What foreseeable effects do you see and or repercussions for your immediate job site, for your immediate projects? What's going on in your area?
So I've typically either been in DoD, Department of Defense, or DOE, Department of Energy as a contractor. The laboratories are really interesting because we are considered a federally funded research center, essentially. So it's a slightly different variation than when I've worked for Ball Aerospace or Raytheon Missile Systems or RTX, I think they are nowadays. So there's a slight twist to that, and it's just really understanding your policies. I will say to Mike's comment, you're generally not impacted because most companies keep a fairly large reserve, but the funding is technically cut off. And so it's just we have a much longer window before it starts impacting. I want to say we have like a 3-month window where we would not anticipate being furloughed, but a furlough could happen should we run out of that reserve funding. So typically we'll receive an email, please come to work. This has happened a couple of times. Don't resume as normal unless otherwise told. From a day-to-day perspective, things that might get changed, especially since we do have a direct government customer, is we might limit like travel to their facilities because their facilities might be shut down. We'll also pause any major purchases during this period of time. So we'll just be cautious to keep that reserve in case things did get prolonged longer than normal. We'll kind of, yeah, we know we need to make these purchases, but we'll wait till we know everything's moving quickly again. So sometimes it can delay purchases to an extent. I think the way the labs has said it in its 75-year history, we have never shut down or furloughed at the national laboratories. But there's the caveat. The only way that would do that is if we were to exhaust the funding stream. So probably if it were to go on, let's say like more than 3-4 months, or at the direction of the NNSA, which means there's a larger problem of programs being definitively shut down, which would be that would be a major security aspect kind of coming into play if that were to happen. So we typically operate as just keep moving forward, be cautious of travel. We typically tend to not worry, but because we do have that large budget of reserve funding, like I'm actually going to be in DC next week for personal reasons. Right, the quick impact there is, well, our laboratories, a lot of our contractors have great reserves, not so much some of our other federally funded institutions. So all the Smithsonian's will be closing within about a week and a half if things aren't resolved. And so it can just depend on how much a company or an entity keeps in their reserve funding to keep going on.
Awesome.
And so we've more or less, as a country, accepted this is just going to happen. And so I think more and more contractors, especially, are really buffering those reserve funds.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. Real quick. Yeah, Mindy, I think the question here is if your customers are critical DoD, you're probably going to be safe for a while. If they're not, then that becomes an issue. Like you say, the Smithsonian and other
Yeah,
non-critical efforts, they
like
will get
sometimes we'll
knocked
see
off the
our
list.
like laboratory, so like because we fund a lot of different things. So certain programs that will happen too, but typically whether I've either been in a different company or the laboratories, they'll usually use indirect funding to keep something going or reallocate. Even right with our current administration, we do a lot of climate-based studies at the laboratories for a lot of different reasons that are actually not remotely tied to climate change. It's a lot of it doing, that's why when we talk some of the administration aspects of some of the technologies would improve our jet fuel systems. And because they're technically climate because it's an alternative fuel, but when you take the step back, it's not just oh, we're trying to help the planet. It's like, there's other implications of some of these alternative technologies. And what we did to handle a lot of the climate-based directives were rebrand different areas or reallocate engineers to different areas. So even in a shutdown situation, a lot of times you'll just see a little bit of movement on tasking typically.
Thank you, Mindy. Great insight. Great response there. Uh, Shifting over to Diego, you're the youngest one of all of us, and you just recently got your job. And from what you told me, you're on your fifth week with your new employer, right? You did share with us that they do have a union, which for the professionals, so that's interesting to a lot of us here. But the question is to you is how do you feel about this government shutdown? Do you have any insight? Do you have any questions? Are you stressed about this situation? Because I know that the current employer that you're with has gone through over the past 2, 3 years kind of tumultuous times, but at the same time, the government shutdown does affect some of the divisions that this particular company is involved in. So, what's going on through your head, and what have you heard, and what's going on at this point that you might be concerned with?
Yeah, so I'll answer the company perspective first. The memo that was sent out was that the shutdown is on a need to know basis, and your leadership will, send you an email saying, hey, this is going to affect your work. I haven't gotten an email from my leadership, so I'm good. And then in terms of the company overall, at least the KC-46 tanker program up here, I mean, that's an old program. It's been around since 2011, so I'm sure we're still going to keep delivering those airplanes. So work, to my understanding, is good. Now, outside of work and shifting to my overall perspective of this, I think that this shutdown is, not fair for especially a lot of the essential employees like TSA, air traffic controllers, and yeah, and then I think what's really unfair is when the administration said, "Oh yeah, not only are we having the shutdown, but expect layoffs like within 1 to 2 days." So again, you're the administration is once again punishing the wrong people, for lack of better words. But yeah, but yeah, work is good. I imagine we'll see how long this government shutdown lasts. I'm sure if it's more than a couple weeks, then I would start being concerned about airplane certification. But I'm not a exec, so I don't know what the time is on that. But yeah, those are overall my opinions.
Yeah, thank you, Diego. Just wanted to get a perspective from one of the younger individuals that just started a full-time position. So thank you for sharing that. Over to Alex Polo. You're in the sales business and you're in the aerospace and DoD sector as well. You've heard about the shutdown. We kind of run down about what that means, what's been going on since this morning. But your perspective, what's going on, and how do you feel, and what do you see at this moment that might affect you or is already impacting part of your job?
So honestly, I haven't seen an impact yet or heard of an impact that this will cause. I do work with companies like Anduril, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, and all, but nothing of concern yet. I mean, also, of course, a lot of my sales are in the medical industry, industrial automation, semiconductor. So those industries, they have not mentioned anything to me thus far. So yeah, my company, we were a distributor of automation services, but nothing as well has been notified to us, or that we should, uh, you know, research with our customers or anything like that. So
Yeah, good.
I'm optimistic. That's all. That's what I'll say.
That's awesome. Yeah. So your company seems to be a little bit more diversified in its dealings with different entities, right? So
Yes.
the next question to you would be then, why should we as individuals, as just general individuals, be informed about why and what the government shutdown is and how it affects us at a normal level, not within our jobs necessarily?
I mean, yeah, the government, basically any decisions they make affect our lives, directly and indirectly, especially for people that work for the government and stuff. But yeah, it's always important to know what's going on, to see, if this is going to last a long time or not. Uh, but again, for me, uh, usually when there's been government shutdowns in the past, at least in my profession, my role, I have not been affected as such. So, but yeah, I think it's always important to be wary of what's going on in the government, especially with the government, because again, all our lives are affected by their decisions. So.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mike Cruz. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think Alex, you kind of hit on it. I think government shutdowns, I think, affect more the social programs that we have: medical, health, food, education. All those things are soft in the eyes of the administration. They're basically non-critical jobs. That's the term that the government likes to use. If you're critical, you get paid. If you're non-critical, they can do a lot of things to you. So I think an awareness on our part as citizens is family and friends and whatever. Are they getting affected by any social cutbacks? Because a lot of people we don't know it are they may be on food stamps or healthcare issues or educational things. Disability children programs. And those things can get stop funded immediately. And those would probably impact us the most. Like you said, over the years that I was in government, the shutdowns we had, the rifts we've had, I weathered them all. Minimal impact, but it's there are people that are non-critical social programs that will get impacted by the shutdown. I mean, money will stop flowing. And when the money stops flowing, then services stop.
Yeah.
And not only services stop, but people don't get paid. And so they're put in a bind of paying health bills, rent, or whatever. But I think, Lazo, when you say, how does it affect us individually? If you're living on the edge and you have any government subsidies or support, yeah, you should be worried. But I think the most of us that are middle class, financially stable enough to weather out the thing. Like Mindy says, they got 3 months on their reserve fundings for the laboratory. A lot of companies kind of plan for that, especially if their funding is tenuous as that time. So in private industry, they probably prepared for this. They know it's coming. So there's probably a little preparation on those sides. But the other activities, social activities and stuff that can't prepare and that have to do day-to-day operations, we may get affected. I would be surprised if I see any effect in the next 2 to 3 weeks, 4 weeks, where I live and the people around me. Mm-hmm. Maybe so. I mean, we have big Navy bases here. We got military. If the non-essential military are furloughed, that will be an impact. Yeah. And it's unbelievable, but I still see articles where government families are still need food subsidies, need housing subsidies, and I'm going, that's crazy. But this could make it worse.
Yeah, right. And so that being said, we talk about the government shutdown, and we talk about, it could, if it lasts long, or depending on how long it lasts, which leads me to the next question, right? How long on average is a government shutdown? I looked it up and I saw an average of 8 to 9 days. That's the average, right? Which is about a week and a half or so, working days. That's what you're looking at. And that in itself could have a little bit of setback depending on how you're doing. That could mean not getting a paycheck or two for some individuals. And if you're living paycheck to paycheck, that could be detrimental to a family, right? Especially when you're trying to put food on the table, trying to pay bills, trying to pay transportation for gas, gasoline to get to and from work, trying to pay for some medicine for your loved ones, depending on how critical the illness might be. That could be a difficult situation, right? So 8 to 9 days, 10 days, it doesn't seem like a lot to a lot of us, but to some individuals, as Mr. Mike alluded to, some individuals that are living paycheck to paycheck, they're on the edge. This could make or break them for at least the rest of this year, which means that, the holidays are nearly upon us. So some people are gonna go without, celebrating a lot of holidays the way that they normally do, because they have to revamp or restock their cash supply in that essence. Also, some of those individuals are actually rely on some of the SNAP or whatever, welfare stamps or whatever it is that they're called now. That could have some repercussions. I did hear that those would immediately stop providing support, right? I also heard that some of the medical, like Medicaid, government provided health assistance was going to be stopped immediately. So that means that anybody that actually has any of those services, if they had a doctor's appointment today, that's no longer available. That goes away. That's what I heard, and that's the way I understood it. So it does have some repercussions. I mean, to us individually, as Mr. Mike alluded to, I believe that none of us are impacted drastically at this point just because of where we're at. But we might know some individuals that could be impacted, which leads back to some of the mental health conversations that we've had. Some of those people are going to get more stressed. Some of those individuals are going to go through more of a hardship, more financial hardship, and it does have repercussions at the end of the day. This is our society, this is our community, so we need to be alert, aware, and try to at least lend a helping hand by listening, and wherever we can, try to support however we can, right? That's just a little bit of advice for all of us to be wary of this situation. So with that being said, Mindy, any additional thoughts, comments that you might have regarding the shutdown, not necessarily with the lab that you work, but just in general of what you're seeing and what you're probably hearing, and anything that you've experienced in the past shutdowns that we've gone through?
What's interesting is I know you looked up the average. Our company had also sent out the longest period of time there had been a shutdown, which was actually on the more recent side, which is about 30 days. So that's been the longest shutdown that we've experienced as a country in our history. But what makes that interesting, right? You look at these different services and what you're starting to see in this political environment, which is kind of interesting to watch real time, right? I live in a very democratic state for the most part. Like, we're considered pretty blue. But what we're starting to see is I'm starting to see our state adopt more rights-based activities to compensate for the lack of federal support. So, like, we're actually, I think today was the day universal childcare just started in New Mexico. So it doesn't matter your income. Universal childcare is now going to be part of our state, but that's funded through the state, not through the federal side. So even, right, I think when we typically associate from a political standpoint, states' rights and state operating systems tends to be in a very Republican space. But we're actually seeing a lot of Democratic-based states starting to implement because of that lack of federal access. So it's kind of interesting to watch and live real time how states are handling these different scenarios, right? And so just really interesting to watch. I know we're also doing so. Our state also provides, not through federal funds, but for every student, lunch is free for every student. Doesn't matter parents' income. Which for like my kids, right? My kids, we would have to pay for everything. But theoretically, now I would not have to pay for childcare if my kids were in the daycare age range. Wouldn't matter. They don't care. Their philosophy was it's too much bureaucracy to have all that level of paperwork. When if you're usually past a certain income threshold, you're probably going to find other options anyway. So instead of creating a paperwork system, make things universal. So it's kind of interesting to watch these political lines blur, which were traditionally associated with different parties. That's kind of how these shutdowns and how frequently they're happening now is starting to shape how states handle these situations.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. Mr. Mike Cruz, yes, sir.
Yeah, I think we have to remember what a government shutdown is. What is it? All it is a deferment of payment. The money is going to come. They have the budget. It's just about passing the budget, which means keeping the money flowing. So, will a shutdown last forever? It can't. We have to function at some level, and at some point they may do a partial bill passing or whatever. But it's all about deferred funding. So keep that in mind. I mean, the government still has to function. They still have to pay. They're still paying a lot of people. Not the whole government is shut down. Just parts of, our representatives are still getting paid. A lot of the government is still on the payment schedule. So it's not the whole thing. It's things that are in the budget, and that's what you need to watch. And Mindy, you're right. You need to be aware of what's in the budget that's being deferred, and what monies are being held back for the time being. And that will affect somebody, but eventually that money will come forward. It has to, or else our government fails.
Thank you.
So just remember that it's a deferred payment on the government's end. Private industry is still flowing.
Yeah.
They're still making money. They're still generating revenue. They're still making product. And so, if you think about it, can the government work without private industry? No. So, private industry still has to be functioning, still has to be generating revenue, paying people so people can make their house payments and food and gas and all that other stuff. So to me, it's just, it's a bothersome part of government when you do a government shutdown. I mean, the budget, what's our debt now? Trillions of dollars. I figure our national debt is trillions of trillions. That's still going to grow.
Yeah.
We're still going to be spending money that we don't have. And
Right.
That's to keep our company going. Okay. So.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Diego Martinez, you have your hand up?
Yeah, just like I asked Mr. Mike Cruz a question, just so I understand when you say by deferred, you're talking about like just shifting the money to, certain areas, right? Passing of the budget so that money can go, to this area and those things, right?
Well, when we talk about the whole budget, the budget shutdown, you have to look at what is being debated. And I mean, in the budget, there's thousands of budget lines, and each line has money in it. So they're going to say, okay, these lines we're going to fund, these lines we're not going to fund. And so in the actual budget shutdown, you have to be aware of what items are being deferred in payment. And deferred in payment means they're not going to be paid now, but they'll be paid later. And so the whole budget shutdown thing is basically a deferred payment, or in some cases, if they really get hard nosed about it, which I very rarely think that they do an actual cause a rift. And they may say we need to get rid of essential people during this time in order for the budget to pass. So that could be a requirement, but I haven't seen that. So I think it puts a lot of people under stress that are on the edge that need the federal assistance. But you got to remember the federal budget is big. and there's a lot of people involved, and not everything is shut down. Not everything is deferred. It's only going to be special things. So to really be up on it, you need to go into the budget and say what things are going to be deferred for the time being. Or are people not going to be furloughed? Not paid. That can happen. And when the president said that we're going to fire people, that will be unprecedented, and it could happen, but they've never done it before. So deferment means they're not getting paid now. They more likely will be paid later, because that's been the scenario.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. So it's an interesting situation, and obviously, as Mr. Mike Cruz also alluded to, if there's a RIF or reduction in force, this time around is going to be the first time that it does actually happen the way it's being displayed, or at least communicated to us, right? So that's going to be an interesting situation. So, yes.
One more quick thing. We all need to remember, and Mindy, you kind of been through this. We've had reductions in force.
Mm-hmm.
Government has reduced its manpower levels due to other reasons, funding, not being there, running out of product or whatever. So the government does have a process for reducing its workforce and reduction in force, and that's been the methodology. Currently, the administration has done it with hey, you're gone, without any recourse, which is unprecedented also. But that all can happen. So just remember, the government weighs just like a private industry. It grows and then it contracts. It grows and it contracts. And so there's going to be time that the government does lay off a lot of people or close agencies or whatever. But I think the biggest question that the conservatives have is that the government's gotten too big. It's expanded. It's grown. We've created new departments, and it's da 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 da. So that's the biggest discussion point on the growth of the government. We've grown it. We've grown large, and now we need to come back down, which is kind of a normal process that takes care of itself. But when you have outside forces making that happen, then it's a different scenario.
Yeah. So I did a quick search here, and what are the things or topics being debated, contested? So one of them is healthcare subsidies via the Affordable Care Act. So the Democrats want to extend or preserve some of the tax credits. That's one of the things that's being debated. The other thing is cuts to Medicaid welfare. So Republican bill, they want to propose stricter cuts and stricter eligibility or changes to how Medicaid is funded. Some of the budget cuts and spending caps that are being proposed here by the Republicans is that they want to keep the current levels, but they don't want to add what the Democrats are desired in healthcare subsidies. So that's what we talked about, the first bullet point about healthcare, right? The Affordable Care Act. Reduction in force planning, that's a topic at hand, is how the mass layoff reduction program is being restructured, reimagined. It's a little more severe than the standard furloughs that have been in place in the past. They're also trying to figure out and are discussing, debating on what functions are essential versus non-essential. So that's one of the things that they're talking about, whether it's national security, law enforcement, air traffic control, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one of the things that they're talking about. They're also talking about the invoicing and procurement. So many government contracts or procurement actions will be halted. Invoices may not be paid until after the shutdown. So that's one of the things that's also going to be impacted in this regard. So those are some of the things that I could quickly see and find during this time. So that's what's being debated, contested during this particular shutdown. So I hope that adds a little more insight, a little more light into the situation, right? So apparently all of us, at least in this forum, are not immediately affected. However, as Mindy alluded to, the longest shutdown has been 30 some odd days, right? The average is between 8 or 9 days. I believe those are working days, so you just got to keep that in mind, right? Weekends are not counted. Mr. Mike Cruz alluded to, the government senators and Congress people are assured payment. So they're not stressing over this. So that leaves going back to Diego Martinez's comment. The public is the one being once again chastised to some extent when this happens, right? If you are furloughed, you do not get paid. So you're essentially laid off, but not laid off in the common sense, but you're laid off without payment. And then you come back and resume your position, and your payment starts from that point on. So assume that you go off in furlough for 2-3 weeks. You don't get paid for those 2 to 3 weeks, but you still have to pay for electricity. You still have to pay for rent. You still have to pay for gas. So that's the stressful situation that we're going to encounter, depending on how this shutdown goes and moves forward or lengthens too. So just keep that in mind. And as time progresses, we'll start seeing what this situation actually costs us to our economy, to our society, to our communities. As Mr. Mike Cruz said, at this point, we're not seeing anything. It's obviously the first day, so we're not going to see a lot of impact. But over the next couple of days, if this doesn't get rectified fast, it's going to have more repercussions that we're going to continue seeing, right? So with this, I just wanted to bring it to light. Around the room, Alex Polo, any final thoughts, any final comments, sir?
No, I just want to thank you for this topic. Yeah, I mean, it's an eye opener too for, at least my kids, like I said, have never really been affected by a government shutdown, but, listening to how it affects people and all that. I don't have relatives either working for the government, so haven't also experienced with my relatives, but yeah, it could happen to anyone too. So just be prepared and stay up to date with what's going on with the government.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you. Mindy, any final thoughts or comments?
Yeah, just pay attention to what's going on in your government, whether it's especially local government, right? We're talking at a federal level, but really understand what your local Congress people are trying to implement in your communities. It can have big impacts that you might not even realize. And just taking that time to understand what those bills they put forth through could have real impacts on a person's day-to-day life, right? In our case, for New Mexico, it was a really big positive for Like, I think that I was like, my kids, I'm beyond benefiting from it. But right, childcare, when I was paying for my son, it was more than my mortgage. And if you were to have more than one kid, right, that could save you 25K to 30K per year. That is a lot of money that you can put into stimulus into the economy by taking away that particular burden. You've created a better workforce need for childcare providers. There's emphasis, what we discover in New Mexico is we have a lot of really low income areas. And right, less bureaucracy. No, there's no barrier to entry. There's no filling out a form. There's no having to travel to get to a computer. It's just find an approved facility. So the work is on the employer to do it. So watch those different things that are happening. Things can really impact lives that you might not be cognizant to if you're not paying attention to the different things going on. And I work with a lot of different organizations, including SHIP, where we work with different grants, different fundings with some of our local communities. So our SHIP chapter isn't really funded, but we partner with our United Way group in New Mexico to help fund different STEM events and like that, because they have a much stronger financial background, but they let us know about policies that could impact us and what that means for us as a nonprofit in the area.
Thank you, Mindy. Great insight, great perspective. Diego, any final thoughts, comments, sir?
No, yeah, I mean, I'll definitely take the advice of Alex and Mindy, and kind of somewhat familiar with how California operates when there's shutdown. But I live in Washington now, so I'll do a little research on how Washington State operates when they do when there is a government shutdown. And yeah, and I think I won't know if something affects me or not until I actually read a bill or whatever. So I'll definitely take that advice.
Also look into how your union helps or supports you. In this case, I wasn't aware that you had a professional entity union there, so that might be to your benefit to some extent, but also they operate by seniority as well, so just keep that in mind as, just keep it in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes, I will allocate time for that.
Awesome. Mr. Mike Cruz, any final thoughts, comments, concerns?
Yeah, I was just thinking, I have a friend that has two in-laws that work for Fish and Game. They may be affected by the shutdown. So think about the people around you and where they work, and they may be affected. But I just think this is just a political, it's just it happens now and then. It shouldn't have to happen when you have the Congresses, the legislation working with each other. It happens less than the actual, yearly you have to do the budget resolution. So, did you look it up, say how often it has occurred in the last 20 or 30 years? That would be another interesting thing, because I think budget shutdowns have been, I think, less than 10 in my last 40 years that I think.
It's been 20 total ever.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it hasn't been much. I mean, I went to work in the 70s, and we had our first
Yeah, they said since 1976. Funny enough, when I was double checking the dates, I was like, that one had shown up of since 1976. There's only been 20 times total, and only 3 in the past 12 years.
Yeah, it's not the normal thing. It's just the guys are throwing spears across the aisle there, and nobody's going to get their way, so they baby it up, wah 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 wah. That's what I look at it.
One interesting thing that I just noticed is that I looked at the stock market, and it spiked. It spiked this morning. I mean, yesterday it was tanking, and all of a sudden this morning, my assumption was going to be, the stock market is going to be red. The S&P 500, Nasdaq, whatever tracker you're following. Most of them have gone up between 3 to 5%. That's what I've seen.
There's opportunity where there's stoppage in some places.
Yeah,
so private industry's looking around, and there's some things to be had and made. So just because the government hiccups doesn't mean that private industry is shutting down. No, somebody's taking advantage.
Yeah, so it's just a little side note there. If you're looking, the stock market spiked today, despite of the bad news. I would have assumed bad news, it would have tanked, and also the whole situation just doesn't really make sense. But it is what it is at this point.
What you use the term? Is it bad news? Is it bad news? It's bad news. It's bad news for some.
Yeah,
it's not bad news for all.
Right.
And the Padres are going to beat the Cubs today. Okay.
Okay. All right. Okay. Got it. Well, with that, thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining Cafecito Chats. We'll see you next week. Hasta luego. Bye bye.